Copyright disclaimer. Under Title 17 U.S.C. Section 107, allowance is made for fair use for purposes such as criticism, comment, news reporting, teaching, scholarship, and research. Fair use is permitted by copyright statute that might otherwise be infringing, nonprofit, educational, or personal use, tips a balance in favor of fair use. Okay, guys, I'm going to read this article from Daily Mail. Woman lifts the lid on what it was really like growing up in the Church of Scientology's Sea organization. Catherine Spallino recently appeared on the Cults to Consciousness podcast. She explained how she was born into the religion before becoming a cadet. But the now mom of three revealed that she was horribly neglected as a child. By Raven Sant for DailyMail.com. Published May 5th, 2024. A woman has candidly lifted the lid on what it was really like growing up in the Church of Scientology's Sea organization. Catherine Spallino, who is now based in Minnesota, appeared on a recent episode of the Cults to Consciousness podcast to discuss her childhood experience. She explained that she was born into the religion and grew up as a cadet before being trained to become a full member of the Sea organization, the senior-most status of staff in Scientology, which started as the founder's private navy. That alone, honestly, you guys, I think should have been a crime. Impersonating the Navy. But mom of three, Catherine, who has since authored memoir, The Bad Cadet, has revealed how she was horribly neglected as a child and was left with no education after being forced into hard labor from a young age. Jeez, I'm a mess today. Sorry, you guys. It's also still going on as we speak. Catherine Spallino, who is now based in Minnesota, appeared on a recent episode of the Cults to Consciousness podcast to discuss her childhood experience. She explained that she was born into the religion and grew up as a cadet before being trained to become a full member of the Sea organization. Catherine began by telling host Jaleese Ansola how she was born at a Scientology church in Hollywood. How she was born at a Scientology church in Hollywood, but never got registered at birth. My parents were so busy working for the Church of Scientology, they never got around to registering me, she shared. I'm sure that they're not encouraged to do that. This would later prove to be a problem since a lack of Social Security number meant she could not legally get paid. But she conceded the oversight likely stemmed from the fact that children were not prioritized within the organization because kids were considered adults in small bodies. Stemmed from the fact that children were not prioritized within the organization because kids were considered adults in small bodies. Elaborating on her path to become a cadet, which she didn't have a choice of, by the way, Catherine explained, for cadets, which is what I was, our parents worked for the Church of Scientology in the inner circle of it, kind of like the inner sanctum. They signed a billion-year contract giving their life to the Sea Org, and in turn, mine as well. So I was literally born in the Sea Org, and I had started signing contracts by the time I was 6 years old. By the time I was 6 years old, saying, I'm a Sea Org member. That's my purpose. Because, heaven forbid this child would have her own purpose, right? It's black magic. Catherine said that at 8 years old, she randomly got pulled aside at school and got told she would be going to live in the cadet ranch, where her older sister, who was 6 years her senior, was already staying. I don't remember saying goodbye to my parents at all. I just got in a car and left. That's how nonchalant it was, she said. Some really good pictures in this article. I'll definitely put the link in the description of all these mind-controlled children, the ones that continually get physically abused, neglected, essayed, and then told it's their fault and further punished. Yeah. Otherwise known as child abuse, sexual battery. Mom of three, Catherine, who has since authored memoir, The Bad Cadet, has revealed how she was horribly neglected as a child and was left with no education. A pretty young lady. I have that book here floating around somewhere. Catherine divulged that she felt special, that's the love bombing, and was keen to impress from the outset, adding, all I want to do when I was there is be a good cadet. I went with my best friend at the time, and we arrive at the school, and I'm just like, I can't believe we're going to be cadets. Catherine divulged that she felt special and was keen to impress from the outset, adding, all I want to do when I was there is be a good cadet. Oh, that was under the picture. I'm sorry, you guys. They have that in there 2 times. The young cadets were shipped off to a boarding school. The young cadets were shipped off to a boarding school. The young cadets were shipped off to a boarding school. As she shared, I was not raised with my parents. And that's their fault. By the time I was 8 years old, I'm living away from my parents at a boarding school in the mountains above Los Angeles. That's also that isolation. They're really big into that. I'd see my parents very rarely. It becomes once every few months. Sometimes I wouldn't see them for a year, and I thought that was normal. They had little to no involvement in raising me. She dished that she was instead raised by staff members in her dorm, which she shared with between 13 and 16 other girls at a time. Let's just let's expand that a little bit, because a lot of the staff members were children. There were 3 bunk beds stacked high, all crammed in a room, and we would all just get ready together. The group would then walk to a school building opposite the Church of Scientology. The group would then walk to a school building opposite the Church of Scientology. Catherine explained we would all go there for the day and learn how to read, and so on. But we'd already started the Scientology processing and indoctrination at the time. Also, how do they get away with having these so-called teachers that have no qualifications? No shade to them. I'm not saying that they don't have anything to offer the world or to help. But how do they get away with not having teachers that are registered with the state or the federal government somehow, Every day there was some sort of Scientology word or term that we would be learning verbatim and repeating back, and we would shout it over and over which is a form of an indoctrination. Yes. Then there's a picture of all these kids looking like a bunch of military, like a formation. It's sickening. She said that once a week the children were also taken to an exhibition about Scientology founder L. Ron Hubbard. Yeah, the known felon. And there's a rumor floating around that he was essaying his daughter Diane. It's really well documented. Just go do your own research. And that a 7-year-old girl should not have any problem with a grown man kissing her. Sick. The young cadets were shipped off to a boarding school, as she shared. I don't even think that's a boarding school. They're just calling it that. That's a good save, you know. It's not, I don't believe it's really a boarding school. They call it that, but it's not that. As she shared, I was not raised with my parents. And then they picture the Scientology cross, which they're not Christians, so that's sacrilege right there, overlooking the cadet ranch. She said that once a week the children were also taken to I already read that. We would see all this information about L. Ron Hubbard, about how much we adored him, she said. Oh, God. Have you guys seen him? Ugh. Gross. Every week we would see these amazing accolades as an exhibit of him. It was literally like a museum that they walk through and they show all the world works of L. Ron Hubbard. You know what that also reminds me of, you guys? There's a lot of indoctrination, too, with Hollywood celebrities, honestly. And I'm not a fan of Michael Jackson. And I've done videos in the past that were right on point. I had to just use pictures. But it's that thing. It's like building them up. Oh, they're so great. They're so wonderful. You know? To me, he was like a god. It's also black magic right there. This all-knowing person who knew everything about the world. Discussing the concept further, she said, I thought that he knew everything that there was to know, and I did think he had special powers. Catherine committed herself to being in the cadets until the age of 14. When she was invited into the Estates Project Force, EPF, as a part of the Sea organization, which she described as a boot camp for children. The EPF is when I start to run into trouble because I'm 14 and I really like boys. And there's a lot of cute boys on the EPF, she said. Yeah, that's natural. That's as natural as it can be. I can't help flirting with them and I keep getting shamed for that. Yeah, executives probably were good at shaming too, huh? They say get your valiance in, which means get your Sea Org personality on. Sounds like a mask, doesn't it? Stop messing around and joking around. 14. That's what you're supposed to be doing, is joking and messing around. That continues for a couple of years where I finally joined the Sea Org, and I'm always just getting yelled at for being too loud, too rambunctious, and I also kind of skip out on Scientology studies. Can you blame her? I'm kind of doing what normal teenagers might be doing, except for I'm in a cult environment where there's all these rules. She said that within the organization, age does not matter. Yeah, that's a pedophile-like paradise in there. So there would be some teenagers holding executive posts who were telling adults what to do. That's weird. Catherine divulged that at 16 years old, she was subject to an interrogatory where her contemporaries were forced to report on her bad behaviors. Yeah, that's snitch culture. Same things they did in the NAZI, same thing they did in USSR, same thing they did and they still do in China and North Korea. I was so mortified I get called into the ethics area, which is in the place you go when you are in trouble, she said. Another picture of them with all their faces blurred out, and they're all smiling because they're kind of forced to smile. They're like, everybody tells us that you're always in the bathroom putting on makeup, that you're always goofing off, that you're not in course, you don't take your post seriously. I just feel so ashamed. I feel like the whole organization knows that I'm such a bad Sea Org member, and I feel so bad about it. That's so sad. She wasn't even allowed to be a teenager. She said that from then on she tried to fit in and be more robotic, but admitted, this cycle starts to take a toll on me, and at some point I have to choose, am I going to stay or am I going to go? Catherine shared that anyone in the outside world who does not know about Scientology is referred to with a derogatory term that brands them as stupid because they don't know any better. She was also warned about leaving the Scientology group in no uncertain terms. They'd say, you're going to be promiscuous. Wow. You're going to end up on drugs. You're not going to have a lot of money because you're leaving the good place, she said. Which is actually the opposite. It's a bad place. Nonetheless, the then teen was still unhappy within the organization. She continued, the jobs I had in the Sea Org were very tedious, boring, pointless jobs where I had no excitement or joy in it. Yeah, that's one thing they don't like anybody to have. Excitement or joy. Catherine explained that followers were not allowed on the internet, but one of her jobs was that of a rudiments register, in which she had to try and entice Scientology followers back if they had started to become disillusioned. I'm 15 years old and I have to convince adults to come back to the church because they aren't coming anymore, she said. Yeah, because they figured out what was going on. I would have this list of people to call, and I would call them, and I would get sworn at and hung up on. Poor thing. They're probably being harassed, all of these people who I'm calling, and I'm just like, why do people seem to hate Scientology so much? I don't understand. I didn't really understand it. That was my first post for a few months, and within a couple of weeks, I was already hating it. I never had any success. I was definitely having to push myself to try to work because it was just so pointless. Also, too, it's just reminded me that, yeah, they would never hire people like a normal employee situation because they don't want to pay for all this labor. Because that's similar to a debt collection or something that she's doing right there. People will write reports on you. It's very Big Brother. Your husband will write a report on you if they feel that you're saying something negative about the church or the Sea Org, or if you're complaining like, oh, I had to stay up till midnight to get this work done. Yeah, they want happy SLAVEs. Catherine explained that she struggled to get paid because she still did not have a Social Security number, but the organization still took taxes out of her $15 weekly paycheck, which left her broke. I still don't understand how. Well, I kind of have an idea how it went on so long. But she said that she was teased because she only had one pair of underwear, adding, I also had no shoes. At one point, I was walking around barefoot. Wow, that's really sad. There's nobody to look out for me, and nobody cares, I guess. That was just the way it was. That is so sad. But eventually, and what were those adults doing? They couldn't help her out without trying to her? But eventually it came too much. It became too much. It was just weighing on me, and I was like, maybe I'm not meant to be in the Sea Org. Maybe I'm meant to just be a Scientologist, somebody who just takes services from the Church of Scientology and doesn't have to act like a Sea Org member. Maybe that would be better, she said. Another huge part that was starting to come to play was being 15 or 16. And I'm aware of this rule that they made in the 80s, where they said Sea Org members cannot have children. I loved kids. I was beginning to realize I actually want to have kids, and I'm also not doing very well in the Sea Org, and I also just want to have a life. That's so sad. There was no joy that I was getting from being in the Sea Org. She eventually left the training program, but was saddled with $5,000 in freeloader debt that covered the cost of the courses she had studied during her time in the group. You know what this also reminds me of? Like a lot of different stories that I've read about how, I don't want to say like just trafficking people, but it's like this has been used since time began. I don't know if you call it indentured servitude. I think a lot of the African American slaves went through this. I think a lot of different ethnic groups went through this, where you're always indebted. Even women that are sex trafficked, they go through the same thing. Like, it's like from day one they owe a lot of money, so that's what keeps them in servitude. Catherine went to school and later decided to break away from Scientology altogether. She landed a job as a personal assistant part-time, which then allowed her to work on her book. Wonder how old she was. I guess 15. I was just putting it all down, just like barfing all my thoughts on my page and copying my journal into it, the author divulged. My mom said when I told her I had been working on writing, she said, "You better not be writing about Scientology." That was her first reaction. Isn't that great? I don't think, like, a lot of these people, like, you can't stamp out the maternal or the paternal instinct. This is my opinion. I think some people just don't have it. And those are the more narcissistic kinds. I'm sick of hearing people making excuses. Well, I was under mind control. I just want people to form their own opinions about it. Most opinions are I was horribly neglected as a child, and I was forced into hard labor and no education. Catherine, who has since married and has 3 sons, revealed that her relationship with her parents is still strained. Yeah, no kidding, right? It should be. Adding, they chose Scientology over me and my children. So some of the older Scientologists that you see with the hunchback and all that, no offense to them, some of them just, they need to freaking just fall in a hole and die, honestly. I know that's cold-hearted, but based on what they've done to their children and all the other children in Scientology, they just need to just go off to the forest and lay down, you know. I'm not angry at my parents because I know that they're just under undue influence, you see? Well, I don't know. They've just been indoctrinated. Yeah, I say don't give them excuses. To what they think, and if they do want to leave, I'm here. I would still be here, and I love them. That's a trauma bond. It's sad, obviously, and disappointing, but I also know how much influence Scientology has on these people. Reflecting on her mentality now, Catherine concluded, I revel in being able to make my own choices for myself every day, all day. It's a nice feeling to not have someone telling you what to do all the time. Yeah. So hopefully some of the Scientologists can wake up and get out. You know, and I know there is, what's that word I always use? You know, some people, they can make amends. You can make amends if you feel bad for what you've done. But when you don't make any type of amends, then you just get what you deserve. So anyways, you guys, I will put the link in the description box. Have a great day or good night wherever you are. Peace.